So welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for August 25th, 2020. I'm Benji Fisher, and also on the meeting are Gabor Hatzi, Ben Mullins, or Benjamin, Emily Nouveau, and Lowry Escola, or Lowry. The only issue that I've seen is on the issue for this meeting is one from Lowry. So would you like to present that?
Yeah, sure. It's something that Ben has been working on mostly, and he's here as well. But I do have the environment set up, so I can at least share my screen, and maybe Ben can help point out some of the things that need feedback. So I have two tabs over here. Maybe we should first mention which issue we are talking about. So
I have it open. It's 1899236. Add new split button render element to eventually replace drop button.
Yes. And so I do have two tabs open. So I have one where we can see how the split buttons look on 7, and one where we can see how the split buttons look on Claro. And so for the most part, I think the split button behaves just like drop button, but there are some differences. So I think one of the differences that we can see is that in a, let's see if I can get a page where there's a drop button so we can compare that to it. Let me set up that. So here on the split button, if there's the tray of the button can be wider than the main button itself, and it's positioned with a third-party library specifically for this. Was it with the, are we using Popper.js for that? Do I remember correctly?
Yep, we're using Popper.
And so in the drop buttons, how it works is so that when you open it, the whole button gets resized to match the width of the widest link on the tray. So that's one of the differences on the split button. Other differences in the split button that we should consider. So the markup is slightly different, but I don't think it has impact on the UX. But besides that, are there other differences?
I mean, the whole thing is built to adhere to the WCAG menu button pattern. So the keyboard behavior is going to be a little different, but it's per their recommendations. So for example, if it's opened with tab navigation or with the keyboard as opposed to the mouse, the first item will be highlighted. You can select an option using letters on the keyboard, which is part of the specification. I'm trying to think if there's other things. Oh, another thing that is different is there's an option to have a version without a dedicated toggle. So in the third row, the split buttons where the primary button is just a toggle, that gives you the option of not having a main option plus a separate toggle. It's just a large toggle button. And that one also behaves identical to, that adheres to the WCAG menu button pattern as well.
And the same works in 7 as well. So right now here, for example, I'm navigating with my keyboard. So I'm pressing the arrows up and down. And if I press A, then it selects the added button based on the recommendation on the spec.
And how do you open the menu from the keyboard? Do you navigate to the little split icon and then press enter?
So I pressed, you can press, I think, enter or space to open it. I think both of them should work, yeah. And once you open the tray, you can see that the first item is focused. But if you use mouse, then the toggle button remains focused. Any other questions or feedback on this?
Oh, there's another thing we should point out that may or may not have implications, but with the drop button, the contents of the drop button are limited to links. With split button, the contents of the drop button can be a link, an input, or a button, but they're all styled the same. And that was based on there being a couple hacks in core to drop buttons to allow that type of usage, but that would be a part of split button in general.
I'm wondering
So,
if there's accessibility concerns on that, but I guess that's something we have to ask from an expert in that topic.
So maybe I'm missing something, but I'm not seeing a huge difference. I mean, there's this little thing about the button not getting wider when the sub items are larger. That's nice. Yeah, like that. And I guess there's the option to not have it split, in which case there's no default action when you press on the button. It just drops down the menu. Is that right?
Yes.
And there are some small styling changes. But those all look like pretty minor differences to me. Am I missing something?
I think the main differences would be on the experience, like the keyboard navigating experience.
So what's the current keyboard navigation experience for drop buttons? I don't think I've tried that much.
So you have to navigate using tab. And when you open the tray, you are not focused on the first item. And you can't navigate based on the alphabet. So basically the idea is to make the experience closer to a regular HTML select.
Are these both Drupal specific widgets, or are these something that everyone uses?
So I think split button at least is a more global used pattern. Drop button, I'm not sure. Does anyone else know if drop button is something that is being used outside of Drupal?
the drop button is very
realized.
strange. Oh, go ahead.
No, I never realized that it was just a Drupal pattern. I never thought about not being general, but maybe it's not. I have no idea.
Let's see if we can find
I think
anything.
it certainly appears elsewhere other than Drupal.
But so I've seen drop button, but they usually behave like a split button. But yeah. Let's see. I only get Drupal, but that could be because of me. Maybe someone else gets.
It could be that it's not called a drop button at other places. So the term may be a Drupalism, but the concept is certainly not the Drupalism.
Exactly.
Maybe it's a multi-button or something. I don't know.
And what's the transition plan? I guess we add a new form element for the split button, and then we have issues to replace all drop buttons in core modules with split buttons. And eventually we deprecate the drop button and remove it.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, the plan. And so we've added some code to the split button render element to make it easier so that you could basically just change the render element type from a drop button to a split button.
And the fourth row down is an example of that. So those are all drop button render arrays where the only thing changed was the render element type, and then it creates a split button. And it will also trigger a deprecation based on that. So it'll advise people to change some of the property names, but overall, then that allows Contrib to make the changes very quickly and not have to worry about the difficult parts until later.
So why are we here? What's the usability concern?
I don't think there's in particular any concerns except the we are introducing a new pattern where the primary button is the toggle. Do we have any concerns on that? And I guess the second change is the UI change where the button doesn't expand to the width of the tray. Do we have any concerns on that? Or is it does it seem like it's not very impactful?
Not changing the width of the button seems like a win to me. I don't see any downside to that. Introducing a new pattern where you make it more like a select element and less like something unusual. I don't know how is that different from just using a select list instead of a split or drop button?
I guess we should come up with like some suggestions on how to use it and be sure that we create the code with these suggestions in place so everybody knows when it should be used and why. I mean, at least on the comments on the code or whatever, anybody is going to make that choice has this information available. If they later want to ignore it, that's another thing, but.
So when should they use in comparison to what?
I mean, if we are making the change to the split buttons, I mean, we should probably explain. So maybe I'm losing a little bit of context. Are we kind of completely removing the one of them, or we are just keeping both of them, but replacing the one to another with the other?
I think the plan is to replace drop button with split button. So drop button would be removed.
Removed. Okay. Okay, I wasn't getting that part. Okay, then there's no conflict between choosing one or another.
So then I guess from UX point of view, there's no concerns on this, or did I get that right? Or what was Benji raising a concern on the new button where the primary button would be just toggle?
Then it just looks like a select list to me, which is a known pattern. I don't see any usability issues.
Okay.
Yeah. But being a select list, I guess that's the reason behind making the replacement, because it's a select list, not a button.
Yeah, or at least more like a select list.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I guess we can say that this doesn't create, at least we are not aware of any usability regressions, and we are fine with the new variation where the primary button is a toggle.
I don't see any problem with it.
You can update the issue if you want with the feedback.
Okay. Sounds good. Do we have any other issues that we want to discuss?
Well, let me just say, for the recording, we've had 2 more people join the meeting, Christina Chamilis, or Sakrina, and Catherine Druckman. So thank you for joining us.
I don't think there were more issues listed anywhere, or at least I haven't found anything else.
It seems like Emily posted a link to Medium on.
Oh, that was just the difference between a drop-down button and a split button. If since that question came up.
But it seems like their drop-down is not, at least it's Bootstrap. It's not the same as drop button. Let's see, what is the. But so is drop button same as drop-down button?
Their example's a little bit different than what we have too.
But yeah, it seems like their split button is similar to what we have, or what we are planning to propose as part of this.
Yes.
Gabor also shared the link about Bootstrap, where the drop-down is literally the same as the one that we have right now.
But I guess they're calling the variation of split button where you just have the drop down. They're calling that drop down, but I don't think they have a drop button either.
No idea.
Yeah, I don't think there's a drop button here.
It says drop-downs can be triggered from a link or from a button HTML element to better fit your potential needs.
And just for the sake of the recording, we're currently looking at getbootstrap.com/docs/4.0/components/dropdowns. And the other link on Medium is an unfriendly URL. It's medium.com/nextux/drop-down-buttons. I'm sorry, drop-down-button -vs-split-button- and here's the unpleasant part, F8E539FC0B78. And that's an article titled Drop Down Button versus Split Button. So probably searching on medium.com for the title drop-down button versus split button is easier than typing in the URL.
So the question actually that comes up to me right now is that, are we really going to totally remove this option or this pattern from Drupal? I mean, does it make sense to remove it, since it seems a legit pattern?
Drop button?
Yeah.
So what would be the use case to use drop button on top of, like if we have split button in core?
Well, maybe an option where you don't want to decide which is the primary one, and you have three actions, which either of them could be whatever,
So that's why we have
the
this
final
variation.
option.
So
Sorry?
it's just part of the split button component.
And then drop button actually doesn't allow that, but split button does.
So there's
Sorry,
a difference
so I am.
in, so there's three different terms that we use. So there's drop button, which is the old component that Drupal used, which is it has a primary action. It has a toggle to open a tray, which has links, and it expands the size of the button to match the size of the tray. Then we have a split button, which is essentially the same, except that so there's a primary action, there's a toggle, and then there's a tray, which could be wider than the button itself. And then we have a drop-down button, which is a pattern. It's a name used by Bootstrap and probably other design systems for describing a split button, which is not actually split. It's a button that has that opens a tray, similar to split button, except that it's not split.
Yeah,
So it's
I can't.
the same as a drop button that we used to have. It's a new component.
Yeah, I can't find any examples of anyone using something like our drop button, because we essentially have drop button is a split button as far as UX goes. It's just not as accessible.
Yeah, like an interesting, so like basically part of the design is that it's showing that the tray is part of the button. Like that's kind of part of the design that we have. And especially in 7, it's made very obvious because it looks like it's a one element. So this is how it looks like in 7. So that's the key difference that we see. So the tray is not going to be part of the button anymore. It's kind of its own. In Claro, however, we already implemented a design where the tray looks kind of its own, but the button size is expanded. And that's why we get, I guess, we've received some bug reports on people being confused why the button size is expanded. Even though it's exactly the same as in 7, it's just less obvious because of the design looks like this. Like it looks like the first item is part of the list.
Yeah, it's much more clear in that sense.
So I guess the difference between these is that you sort of don't have a primary action on the drop button because in 7, all of the elements look like they're equal, even though one of them are directly available here.
But you do have a primary action because it's the one that you're seeing.
Yes, but like when you have it open, when you have the tray open, the primary action looks like it's just one item of the list. So there's going to be a design change in 7 because so the 7 design system already provides designs for split button, and it looks like this.
I see.
But in Claro, we only have one design. Basically, the original, like the design that we used for drop button already matched what is usually used for split buttons.
Okay, so where does the drop down stands on? So this drop down, what is
Yes.
this?
So as part of what we've implemented, it's part of split button component. We could create a new render element for that if we want to. But right now it's part of the split button.
Okay.
The new render element would just extend split button, presumably, because split button does so much of the work already.
It could be even a follow-up if we
Yep.
if we
Yeah, I'll create that. In fact, I think that's a good call.
But I guess then the question is, do we want to keep a drop button type of component alive? And should we implement something like this in Claro as well? And I think if we do want to keep the drop button around, then we probably should implement a similar design in Claro.
So we should come up with a different design?
If we want to keep it around. If we think that there's a place for this type of, like, where the tray looks like it's one with the button or the main or the primary action.
I mean, it could be an improvement on a design perspective, but right now Bootstrap it's not doing that, for example.
But they don't have, like, this component doesn't exist outside of Drupal as far as we know. Like I've personally never seen it, and I don't think it's easy, at least, to find any examples of this.
Of a drop down, you mean?
So this is not a drop down. This is drop button.
Sorry, drop down button.
It's not a drop down button. It's a drop button, which is different in the sense that it's a split button, but the first primary button is designed to look like it's like all of the items have the same weight. I think it was discussed as part of the, maybe there's a discussion that we could still find. Let's see, part of the design. Maybe here. No. Okay, let's see the drop button style update.
I guess the other question we should ask is, if the goal is to replace the drop button with the split button, why not just keep the PHP code the same, the form API element the same, but change the markup it generates?
So I think the main problem with the drop button is that I think using the render element as it is pretty confusing. Maybe Ben.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult to maintain, and basically with the way that the drop button achieves what it does is it's just a unordered list of links, and then depending on the link's position within the list, different styles in JavaScript is applied. And so it's very unwieldy and difficult to make any changes to. And it also only allows the addition of links. And there's many cases where a submit button is desired. And because of the semantics of it, it's not possible to add anything but a link without some pretty ambitious hacks. So the split button addresses that, and so it's a much more the items array is actually a little different what you send to it because you have to specify the render element type, but that additional requirement results in a lot more freedom regarding what you can put in the list. And I guess semantically it's different enough too that I do think that simply replacing one with the other without giving people the option of which one to use could result in some backwards compatibility issues. So this would allow us to use the deprecation path and let people switch gradually.
So here we can see another implementation of the drop button. So it's again the same. So drop button, the list looks so that the first item becomes part of the list. And then in split button, you can see that there's a tray.
Could we have like on a screen some screenshots of that for this drop button? I don't remember the name that you said it was better, but anyway, for this pattern.
Yeah, we can. So we can add some screenshots if we don't already have.
I mean, to the new issue to have this as a follow-up.
But do we need it? Like, so do we want? So are you saying that we need to have drop button in future?
I was saying that based on what Benji was saying. I really don't know what consequences can have not having it. I mean, I assumed none at the beginning, but after what Benji said, I was afraid that there is some need for that. Maybe we could open this issue anyway and then discuss in there if we really need it. I don't know.
So the reason why one of the reasons why from the point of view of Claro, it would be important to get rid of drop button is that it has a lot of bugs. And if we don't decide to replace it with split button, we would have to fix those. And many of them are potentially stable blocking too. So that's one consideration to take into account. So if we are afraid of consequences that it has, we have known consequences of saying that we do want to have it in Claro too.
So I was thinking about this as a follow-up that actually has nothing to do with the stable release. Like it could be like an improvement or something like that, like something new.
But the drop button element has stable blocking bugs that we've tried to avoid by starting to use split button instead. So, but if you say we are going to support drop button, it's not going to be deprecated, then those issues probably is something we still have to solve.
I see.
Which is probably fine, but we just have to know that there's a cost to saying that it's not a no-cost solution.
Okay, I was understanding that we were starting that from scratch then, because it's a new design and it's a different element. Can we make all the changes to the split button, and once Claro's is stable, then open a follow-up for the drop button if we really need it?
But if you deprecate split, if we've already deprecated it,
Yeah, it's like losing the time.
So if the unique functionality of drop button is missed, which would essentially be presenting the primary item as an equal to the items beneath it, I would propose, once there's evidence of that being something that might be missed, creating yet another new render element that provides that experience, but extends split button so it's accessible. Because drop button as is it doesn't adhere to any actual accessibility patterns. So that would be my proposal, is the accessibility of split button, but then bring back a potentially missed experience of drop button.
but I'm not sure if it makes sense to provide those accessibility features on this because of it's not actually a tray, so it doesn't look like a select element. So providing that type of navigation here would probably be confusing, and because this is part of the list as well.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the demo of the split button and look at one of the examples that's most like an existing drop button where we do have a default action?
This one?
So, I guess so. So what's the idea there if instead of opening the tray, I click on the thing that says default link?
It's a button, or it's a link, sorry. So it could be, for example, the list terms link, and it would go here.
Okay, so if I don't expand the tray and click there, it's some link. And if I do expand,
it's still a link.
but it stays up there as sort of the header of the list. It's not part of the tray.
Yeah, it is not part of the tray.
So maybe that really is the main difference between the split button and the drop button. That when you expand the tray, the split button keeps that primary option separate, and the drop button makes it part of the same list.
Yes.
I kind of like the split button, that if something is a primary action, I like having it indicated as such, even when the tray is opened. And I guess even in the drop button, it sort of has pride of place. It's the first item on the list. But I don't think it's a problem that that it becomes separate from the list in the split button.
Something that you said made me think, would it be correct to assume that we should always enforce a primary action? I'm thinking, yes, it will be like a good UX to inform which is the primary action. So I wonder that could be maybe a reason to just get rid of the drop button. I mean, the main reason I had behind trying to keep it is because I wasn't thinking about the costs. I was thinking more about the, oh, that's yet another option that people can have. But taking into account what Laurie is saying, that it has some costs, maybe it's a good reason to try to enforce always having a primary action.
Wait, what? I guess I missed what's the cost of not having a primary action?
Sorry, the cost of so having a primary action should be what we always should try to have, and keeping drop buttons has a cost, which is not deprecating something that is already broken because it's not accessible. So it will mean to try to fix something that is already there, even though we said we can just close it and make it a new one in the future.
Okay.
So I would say going on the direction that Laurie was saying, probably let's just deprecate this and switch to split buttons, because otherwise it has a cost. And if we really, really need that in the future, as you were saying, Benji, we can open a new one and starting from scratch with maybe better implementation or code or something, I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know if they
with,
can make it accessible no matter what, like the same way this is.
I see. Well, then we can have a discussion about if it's worth having it or not, and having then inputs from the accessibility team also on the issue queue.
So I think the accessibility team would say that it's better to have this one because this one is the accessible one. The old one is not.
So yeah, I guess we all agree with that. I mean, right now replacing everything that is in there with this, because this is more accessible and it makes more sense and everything. Just that if in the future there is a need to have a set of actions without any primary action, if there is ever this need, we should discuss how to implement that, because maybe it's really just a select, or I don't know, a label and a select, or I don't know.
So we do have the one. So if you don't have a primary action, so we say that you should use this variation then.
But this variation is
because this makes if you don't have a primary action, all of the items should be equal then, because in this option they are not equal, even though in this view they are, because one of them is visible when the tray is closed.
Could you put again the other page with all the options? No, yes. I mean yeah.
So this option I'm clicking here, so this has only toggle. It doesn't have
and is this something that we're going to have, or we are not going to have? I'm lost right now. Okay, then we do have the pattern with this change.
Yeah, but it looks different than it used to in the past, because in the past we sort of didn't differentiate with the primary option when the tray is opened or the menu is opened. I don't know, because this is not a proper tray, so I don't know how to call it when the options are.
Okay, so maybe a follow-up will be improving the design for this split button without a primary action.
This one?
Yeah, to make it similar, more closer to the one that you were showing from 7.
You mean this one?
Yeah.
So do you want to have this variation still? Because of this one, if you press list terms here, it's still a button. So it's sort of, or link.
I see.
So it's kind of confusing in that sense.
I don't know. No, I don't think so. Sorry if I'm messing the conversation. I don't think so. It's just that I thought that you were saying that this when this is open, the design was better.
Oh, it's different. I don't know if it's better. It's what we used to have for years, and we are changing it now. I don't think it's better necessarily.
Okay.
Like it has all kinds of problem with the accessibility and such. So there are strong reasons to replace it with the new one. And yeah, I guess the question is then like, if someone has an edge case where they think this variation, like this old drop button would be better than the split button that we provide, can we say that because of like these accessibility reasons and these usability reasons, we believe that it's still better that you use this variation than the old one?
Yeah, I agree.
Could we add it as a contrib even?
But it still has the same problems that in the before.
Right. But we
So-
wouldn't be responsible for it anymore because it'd be a contrib. So if someone really wants it.
But the look and feel is the same as the split button, almost exactly the same. So I don't see any reason why doing it then.
Like what? Like, can we think of any edge, like that much of an edge case where you would want to use this rather than a split button?
I can't. I can't think of any of them.
I don't know if my opinion counts, but I actually do not like how that old pattern worked, because sometimes it would have a weird primary choice that didn't make sense, and you'd click on it expecting to get the list, and instead it would be a button and take you through. So as a site builder, I actually I like the improvement. I don't like the old way very much.
Your
Yeah,
opinion. Yeah, your opinion is important.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that it makes sense that we provide an option where there's no primary option, so that then people don't have to add like a meaningless button as a primary option because they were
Right.
forced to add one in the past.
Exactly, that is what I am saying.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just have a couple of requests for updating the issue summary. I would like the summary to call out what I think we've agreed is the primary difference, which is that when expanded, the old drop button has its primary action as part of the tray, and that's not the case with the split button. So I'd like that mentioned in the proposed resolution. And then under user interface changes, I'd like to see some screenshots. So the screenshots are already there on the issue, but they're in a comment way down the page. I'd like to see that in the issue summary.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Yeah. We can totally do that. Any other feedback?
Oh, and while people are thinking of last things they'd like to say, I should mention that 2 more people have joined the meeting, Antonia and Thomas Howell, or World Line Mine. Thank you also for joining us.
Hiya, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So it doesn't seem like we have any additional feedback on the split button. So the next step is then to update the issue summary with some screenshots and an explanation on the key differences between drop button and a split button, so that it's more obvious when reading the issue. And we are fine with the direction as it is. And then we need a follow-up for a separate new render element that makes it easier to create those drop-down buttons that don't have the primary action like split button has.
Yay.
Okay. I guess we have 7 minutes left, so it's probably not enough to cover any additional topics.
Well, I'm also not aware of any additional topics that that anyone is interested in. Oh, let me just echo what Christina said, which is, you know, when Thomas asked whether his opinion was valued, it certainly is. And remember, we get strength from having diverse voices and as many different inputs as we can. Too often these meetings have been a bunch of back-end developers saying, gee, I wish we had a designer here. So so having designers and developers and site builders is really a great thing for these meetings.
Thank you, Benji. I like the fact that this is an opportunity for, as a site builder, to give feedback on what my experience is. So it's a very welcome venue.
Okay. Any other last words?
Nope.
If not, then this has been the Drupal usability meeting for August 25th, 2020, and hope to see many of you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.